preacher's son, and when his daddy would visit, he'd come along. When they gathered around and started talking, Cousin Billy would take me walking.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Steph Davis here from flipthiswholesaler.net, and I have another reader mail question for you guys tonight. This question was written on my Facebook fan page wall a few days ago, and I actually did answer it already on Facebook, but since I've received this question, I have received two other ones actually that are along the same lines, so I thought I would re-answer it for Laura. This question comes from Laura, and Laura's question is, she says, I'm thinking if a real estate agent requires a deposit and I don't use my own money, that transactional funding would be the best way to go, correct? Would this be considered a double or simultaneous close? And then she writes, how fast would I be able to get the deposit from transactional funding if they require one? So it sounds like, Laura, that you're a little bit confused about transactional funding, exactly how it works and what you can get accomplished with transactional funding. And like I said, I've had a few other people over the last few days that have had similar questions. So I'm just going to explain what transactional funding is. If you're going to be going after bank-owned properties, and from your question it sounds like you are going to be, you're not going to be able to assign your contract. Like if you're pursuing properties that are not on the MLS, they're properties that are, when you're dealing with private sellers, like just regular Joe Schmo homeowner, you can just put the property under contract and assign that contract to your end buyer. So there's only one closing. You put the property under contract, you assign that contract to your end buyer goes to closing and buys it from the seller. When you're dealing with bank-owned properties and short sales, most of them, the banks will not allow you, they will write into their addenda that they will not allow you to assign your contract with them. So you actually have to close on it with your own cash or with cash that you borrow, close on it, and then resell it to your end buyer through a separate transaction. There's an A to B transaction, which was you buying it from the bank. You close on it, then you resell it to your end buyer via a B2C closing, which is you selling it to your end buyer. So transactional funding comes into play when you are in a scenario like this and you don't actually have the cash to purchase the property from the bank. So what a transactional lender will do is they will lend you the entire purchase amount, including closing costs. And there's no income verification and there's no credit checks. The only stipulation is that you need to have your end buyer in place. You have to have your end buyer under contract with the deposit. They need to be ready to go to purchase that property from you right after you buy it from the bank. So the transactional lenders will lend to you no problem as long as you have that end buyer in place. They do not, however, or none that I know of, will loan you money for the earnest money deposit. So you're going to have to come up with that on your own. This was the other point that I wanted to address because I had someone else send me a message on Facebook yesterday, I think it was, saying that he did not at the time have an earnest money deposit to give to a listing agent. He's wanting to make offers on REOs and he doesn't have an earnest money deposit. And he's asking me what is the way to get around that. And there really is the only way to get around that, well, it's actually not even really getting around it. You're still going to have to come up with the money, but it's if you're able to locate an end buyer and get a deposit from them that's made out to you that you can actually cash and then get your own deposit and give it to the bank before or right when because once you get a property under contract, once the bank accepts your offer, they're going to say, we need the contracts back in 24 to 48 hours, and with those contracts, you need to have a money order or a earnest money deposit in certified funds, either cashier's check or money order. So if you can line that end buyer up really quick, if you have some buyers already sitting there waiting for deals and you know what they're looking for and you can get them to commit to the property and sign a contract and give you a deposit really, really fast, then that's one way to do it. However, it doesn't always work out perfectly. Sometimes your end buyer is not going to want to write out the escrow deposit to you personally. They're going to want to have it held in maybe at their own title company in an escrow account. So then you're going to have to come up with a deposit on your own. So the bottom line is you really should, if you're going to be making offers on bank-owned properties, you really need to have access to, whether it be your own or whether you're going to borrow it from someone or maybe go 50-50 on a deal with someone. You need to have access, excuse me, you need to have access to an earnest money deposit. And it's usually between $500 to $1,000, sometimes more. Sometimes they'll want 1% of the purchase price. So transactional lenders are not going to give you the earnest money deposit. You're going to need to come up with that on your own. And then really quick, Laura, you asked about the difference between a double and a simultaneous closing. A double closing would be, for example, if you were using transactional funding and you actually closed on the deal with your own cash or with the cash that you borrowed from a transactional lender and then resold it to your end buyer. A simultaneous closing would be like where I'm at in Tampa. There are a lot of title companies that will do simultaneous closings, and they will allow, for cash purchases, they will allow the cash from the end buyer to be used to fund both the A to B and the B to C transaction. So when I go to closing, I don't need to bring any of my own cash and I don't need to borrow money from a transactional lender. I get the funds for the purchase come from my end buyer. So that's the difference between a double and a simultaneous closing. So, but not all areas, not all title companies will perform simultaneous closing, so sometimes you'll have to do a double closing instead and use that transactional funding. And if that's the case, you're going to have to find out what the fees are. Whichever lender you decide to use, you need to find out first what their fees are. So when you're making your offers, you can take those fees into account. If there's a couple $1,000s that you're going to have to pay the lender, you're going to need to take that into account when you're making your offers. So I hope that answered I was kind of long-winded here, but I hope that answered your questions. And if you have any further, if you need any further explanation, feel free to leave a comment and I'll be happy to answer for you. And I will see you guys next time. Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.